As ready as I'll ever be.
Okay. 3. Hi, my name is 7Chaos15. I will be your commentator.
And I'll be the runner for this Gemless category. Chara.
Say your name.
I'm Chara.
Or otherwise than that, happy to be here. And let's talk about just some general things about Project-06. So something that's really important to know is that this is someone created by Chaos-X. It's a project, and it's honestly really amazing of what he's done to make this game feel like the Sonic Adventures 3. To start off, we will start doing some general movement to show you things that she will do, and that way you can understand it right away that the majority of things will be done in said run. So one of them, of course, will be Spin Dash, allowing her to go as fast as possible, just like in SA1. Something that's really cool is that when she does a jump and a bounce, like in SA2, you can do Bounce Excel. That's something that is really cool because you can combine them both and go really fast with the Bounce Excel to a Spin Dash. Now, one of the most very great and technical things that Chaos-X hasn't fixed was something called a high jump, where you click A and X at the same time, or X and square in PlayStation. That way, you can do a really high jump with Sonic. It works for the majority of the characters, but Elise and Tails, where that is A and B, and Silver, he just doesn't have one. It's more like an accidental input whenever you do a high jump. That will sadly get fixed on the next release. Otherwise than that, that is the majority of things you need to know, but there's one additional thing that's really cool about the homing attack. And it is something called Legacy. Legacy has been added on 4.0 and so on. And what it allows is to have a homing attack like Sonic Heroes and Shadow the Hedgehog. And this just allows you to keep your momentum as you move forward, and it gets you farther than a straight jump. Straight jump is much more safer, but Legacy is much more rewarding. It just takes time to practice to get used to. Otherwise than that, last thing about the homing attack is that when you do a jump, or a high jump, whatever your choice is that you jump, you do a homing attack, and then you click A and X at the same time. That way you can do another homing attack. Double homing attacks are very essential in the speedruns that you will see quite often. Until then, there's nothing really to be said besides, let's get started. Otherwise than that, let's go. Wave Ocean. Wave Ocean's a really simple stage, and it's honestly pretty fun to get used to in Section 1. A lot of this general movement will just be mostly spin dashing and bouncing sound, utilizing the momentum to go off of ramps, and it kind of makes you fly. You'll know a little bit more later in the box. Now, what she's going to do is she's going to do some tight timings with homing attacks and high jumps. Homing attack a rail, and something that she found was usually you could bounce on that rail, that we can get a lot of momentum, but she couldn't, and it's not that easy. That's okay. Otherwise than that, just back to some general movement, utilizing a few high jumps there, and going on and so forth. That is just the majority of Section 1 for Sonic. We are going to be moving on to Tails. Tails is a really interesting character when it comes to this game, just because you only see him in, like, I'd say 4 or 5 sections, and a lot of it is just mostly high jump and just trying to spam the A button to get across. And the reason why you spam the A button to get across is because there's this gauge of how long he can fly. If you hold it, of course it goes really fast. But if you keep tapping and spamming it, you will get farther and farther and farther until you make it across where you need to be. Otherwise than that, that will be Section 1 of Wave Ocean. There used to be a different strat where we would do 3 high jumps and fly across this invisible barrier, but that has been patched from 4.0 to 4.5. Now to Section 2. She will try 2 of the 3 rooftop launches. One is really simple and easy, which is try to have just enough momentum to bounce off an enemy and fly. Just like that, like I mentioned previously in Section 1. And another one is really hard. This first one is really easy to get used to, but the second one is really hard because you have to perfectly time your jump and perfectly time the jump on the rock. Boom, she did that. That is perfect. That is something that is really hard that a lot of runners can't do, and it just takes time. Otherwise than that, for the third one, she's not going to do it because it's always the most finicky one. It feels more like a 50-50, so we did a variation. That way we can just get to the stage. Otherwise than that, that is all for Wave Ocean. Time to move on to Dusty Desert. The really cool thing that Chaos X added is variations of how fast you go. With Mach 1, which is just regular standard running. Mach 2, which is either you light speed or you're just holding forward on the control stick, or 3, control stick and light speed. Now we're at Dusty Desert, and here this is one of the 2 missions that we have with Elise. Now Elise, these levels are really short, and it's much more enjoyable than it was in the original just because of the momentum. She's going to utilize a light speed and the slide. That way she can still keep the momentum from when she was just light speeding, and that way she can keep going further and further. It's a very neat trick, and it's very nice. That way you can just get across these things much faster, since you don't really have a spin dash as Sonic abilities. What's really nice about light speeding as well is that it's like magnetic. You can literally just spam the Y button if the rings are really close, and there's a good chance that the light speed will work out just fine. Otherwise than that, it's a pretty short stage, and in an IL, it is sub 46. It's really simple. It's just getting used to the movement and making sure everything goes all you need, like everything your way. We will move on to White Acropolis, one of the 2 only boarding sections, and it's a very peaceful section when it comes to White Acropolis Section 1. And that's just because there's not a lot of crazy things you gotta do with the boarding. It's just more of, well, just trying to get across from point A to point B. There are ramps that you do really cool tricks and animation that, depending on which one, like this one right now, you do 2 of them in a row and you go really fast and you get to the part where you need to be. That is probably the only 2 ramps that are really important besides the one at the very end. But besides that, there's nothing really interesting going around in Section 1 White Acropolis besides just, of course, getting from point A to point B, like I said before. A really cool thing that we found in 3.0 is that when you kept jumping a lot, it feels like you're going a lot faster than you usually do than just riding down the hill. And that in itself, it got nerfed because it didn't have like an air cap, but now that it does, she's just doing her best to still get a little bit more momentum than she usually get. Otherwise than that, back to Section 2. And with Section 2, it's a little bit more tricky because this is the part where spin dashes can mess you up due to the slopes in this game. Unfortunately, that was one of those mess-ups because of how you try to have to rely on spin dashing, hoping that it doesn't like go in some weird direction for you. That's pretty missed opportunity, and of course, spin dash messed up on her again. That's okay. Skipping the lasers and just moving on to Tails. Now, Tails, it's really simple. Just kind of getting from this point A to point B when it comes to the switch, utilizing her high jumps, that way she can get across. If she ever happens to mess up, what's really nice is she can use her tail whip, something that was from SA1, but instead use it in the air to use it as momentum. Of course, she doesn't have to because the preferred way is, well, just getting across with a high jump and moving on and so forth. Something that you'll see is that you'll see that a tail swipe, and something cool with Silver in Kingdom Valley is that there's some way to actually get down to the ground a lot faster. There's nothing much to be said about Section 2 for Sonic after Tails, just cause it's more like utilizing the movement of spin dash, bounce, and just one high jump. But that's about it. Otherwise than that, moving on to Crisis City. Things are getting a lot fast-paced because ILs are crazy. They have made movement so much more interesting. And something really cool, like now, is something that Chaos X has added as well, where in-game cutscenes, something you don't really usually see often in Sonic games, not ever, and it's always really nice to see those. It's kind of nostalgic. Now, the second boarding section, like the second boarding stage in general, is a lot faster because the assumption is that because the slope is like downwards all the time, it allows you just keep being on the board and moving faster than you usually do in White Acropolis, which makes it really nice. just trying to get across and skips some ramps because some are just really slow when the moment you land. Otherwise than that, some are just helps because of the momentum and just trying to get across as best as she can. She's gonna do something really cool. I kind of forgot the name, but that's okay.
It's swagboard.
Swagboarding. Anyway. But swagboarding is a really neat thing, just kind of going backwards with like reverse controls. You don't have to do it, but it's always really fun. Section 2 is something, alright, because a lot of the times you have to rely on homing attacking on the right areas, that way you can actually get to the place you need to be. Luckily, she's doing just fine and utilizing a bounce to get across and skip some of the things that usually take casually. Even that dash panel, but now, unfortunately, she couldn't keep the momentum up when it came to being in the air and trying to hit that spring. Otherwise than that, just kind of keep moving forward with a high jump, trying to use the momentum on the rail, bounce excel again, and the really neat thing about bounce excelling is that you can fast fall, like if you were playing Smash Bros. Ultimate or just any Smash Bros. Game, and that way you can just get to the ground as fast as possible. Otherwise than that, that's a really hard enemy to hit. You have to be really close, that way you make sure that you actually bounce off of it, bounces off of other enemies, and gets right to Section 3. Section 3 is crazy, because we've done many times to improve Section 3, and it contains a lot of movement, mostly spin dashing, utilizing enemy bounce, barely any other high jumps. Trying to make sure your bounce excel is just right. Unfortunately, she messed up a bit, but that's okay, because she still recovered just by doing her best just to get across and utilizing the other backups that are there. This is a great backup, but in an IL format, it is the most stressful and yet the most just focused area you gotta do in Crisis City. Something really cool in Section 4 is that tornado has physics, so where if you slow down, or if you even get bumped, you're actually going to get sucked up. It's something that Chaos X added, and it's a very, very neat thing. It's kind of funny when you actually get bumped. But Section 4 is really straightforward, where you're just relying on where the rings align, and allows you to just keep light speeding, that way you can keep going as fast as possible. Really simple, and the best thing about Mach 3 I didn't explain before is that it allows you to go through boxes and you yourself have collision against other things, making you actually somewhat invincible. With Supersonic, you're just invincible all the time, but at least this helps sort of feel like you're actually the best thing out there with Mach 3. Otherwise than that, that is Crisis City. A pretty not bad stage. I recommend this when you want to challenge yourself a little bit more for newcomers. Flame Core. No. Flame Core is not that fun sometimes. It's because a lot of it is hoping that the spin dash works out for you with the slopes, assuming that you don't end up falling off or have this accidental loop. She does her best to utilize the spin dash as best as possible and to make sure that she doesn't fall off on the wall. Sometimes you do fall off, and that's already hard as it is because it's not intentional to be that way, but because of the way the physics work, it is. And you also see something that you haven't seen in other stages, is combat. Combat is really fun in this game, and with gems it's really powerful. But because this is gemless, we're gonna have to find a way to do combat, which the two ways are utilizing the spamming of homing attacks or using your bounce like you do in original 06. Some things are kept while other things have been improved, like in Heroes. Otherwise than that, doing her best to do her combat, a lot of the time is utilizing that spin dash against single health enemies, and so on and so forth. Does her best to use the bounce excel, which is a really tight gap. Yo, so good. Perfect. Just getting across as best as she can and utilizing momentum as fast as possible. Moving on to Section 2 with Flame Core. Now, really neat thing about Flame Core Section 2 is that you get to play as Knuckles. We'll see that a little bit later. She has to be somewhat away from the door just because of how she doesn't want to hit the purple ball that is sadly something to lock on. Again, something finicky like in Section 2 in Crisis City. She's past that. She doesn't have to worry about that anymore. Now it's just working with the slopes when she spin dashes after Knuckles. Now, Knuckles he's really great casually, but in speedrunning, he does not have a lot of time to be given to just play around with the combat as well as just do more things besides just glide and just get from point A to point B. Simple like with Tails. Of course, utilizing the high jump, that of course it's A and X, because only specific characters depending on A and X as well as A and B. Really simple here. She has a lot of rings, which makes her live in the lava a lot longer, which is really nice. Just getting through this as best as she can. It's really hard because slopes fudge you up a lot. Otherwise than that, getting down to flame core over.
That wasn't actually
Usually,
a bad flame core.
it really wasn't. I'm pretty happy about this. Usually the average is like 230 just because of how horrible the slopes can be, and it makes it really hard to like even get across where you need to be. Otherwise, to my favorite stage, Radical Train, where it is mostly just spin dashes and short hops. And I really like that because it allows you to focus and try to do your best to get just from point A to point B with Sonic. That's really fun. Now, let's hope that, oh, she missed the dash panel, that's okay. Still going to be in the left side, because when you're on the left side, you can do a pretty cool thing where you can get on this very small platform that as long as you learn the timing, you high jump, and you do another high jump on a different rail, and boom, you make it across. Skip the chain jumps, which is something that we also found recently. That allows us to, well, just get across things a lot faster, and not have to worry about, like, any seconds wasted. The last thing that Miku X Lover found, thanks to that person, that they were able to find this box that has collision with the bounce, so you can just skip the enemies, and combat is not necessary. Now to the Mach Speed. Mach Speed is really simple. This is just a simple, very simple to Crisis City, although it just takes some time to get used to when it comes to some areas with Death Barrier, as well as just trying to make sure you align yourself perfectly fine with your jumps. I actually recommend playing Radical Train if you ever wanted to get into Project-06 speedrunning, because it's the most fun, as well as it's just getting used to your general movement. Otherwise than that, that will be Radical Train. Moving on to Tropical Jungle. As we get into Tropical Jungle, it's pretty hard to talk about it just because there's not really much interesting to say when it comes to something like the Elite sections. It's not like a gems category where you can do all these cool things in Kingdom Valley, which we'll get to next stage. But it's mostly just making sure you're being spacious and allows you just to fall down where you need to be, as well as making sure that your jumps are just right. It has less of doing with the light speeding until section 2, but until then, homing attacks, jumps, and spacing yourself around is the best thing that you do when it comes to Tropical Jungle. The really cool thing about this part is that you can get a lot of momentum, and you can utilize that momentum just to go really fast and keep it until you get to that sprint. She's going to try to homing attack the tree trunk. She did it, and usually you go the other way, but she didn't go the other way. Thank you, RNG. Now she's going to do something really entertaining for this stage, which is log skip, where all she has to do is utilize the momentum after touching the dash panel, and after doing that, she will then try to do 2 jumps.
I messed it up.
You messed up? That's okay. That's okay. We'll try it again just to show you. It's a really cool trick, and it's worth doing every time you do Tropical Jungle. She's going to do 2 jump, try to pass this Death Barrier, and she made it. Now she can skip the rest of it that takes way longer than 10 seconds and get to section 2. Utilizing a few light speed with a slide, that way she can get to the places as fast as possible, and just grinding her way with a lot of homing attacks to just get from point A to point B. There's really nothing much to say besides just trying to be pretty precise, just doing your homing attacks just right in section 2.
The homing attack was very mean there.
Homing attacks are mean sometimes. That is it for section 2 and just the rest of Tropical Jungle and Elite stages. Now, we will move on to Kingdom Valley, which is one of the hardest stages to IL sub 3. Only few people have ever sub 3'd IL. And another cutscene by KSX. It's really cool, really neat. I like it. Now, a lot of it is utilizing everything you have. A lot of spin dashes, a lot of light speed, a lot of short hops. That way you can just get out of the way of anything that slows you down, sometimes being springs or dash tanks. And that's pretty rough. Doing her best to skip that way she can still keep her momentum, move on. Otherwise than that, she's doing great so far. Oh, she saved it. Let's go. Alright. Moving on, she gets across. Just keeping it safe because it's not easy. It really isn't easy for Section 1. Otherwise, moving on to the one time you play Silver in Sonic's section. Silver's a really, really nice character to feel and play. He's so much improved and better. He has his own blast that we sadly don't use. But as you can see, she swiped like you were trying to throw an object. And that is a fastball like she can do with the Bounce Excel or with Tails. Otherwise than that, utilizes those boxes to get on and use the Teledash, which is really, really fun to use. And it's really fast, so it feels really worth it trying to do that every time you can do it. Otherwise than that, sadly, that is all of Silver. And we'll never see him again until next release. Or Shadows. Otherwise than that, a high jump to make sure that she gets across above the castle. And no, this is not castle skip, but we'll get there. Castle skip is something that's going to be really hard to do because she has to rely on the collision when it comes to hitting the buildings, homing attacking just right, as well as doing very fast on the second tower that she breaks down. Doing a spin dash, jump, and just a high jump all in one. Let's see if she can do it. Woo! Let's go! Otherwise than that, that's the last part of it, and boom! She's already made it to the goalpost, and she is safe. Now all she has to do is just get to the end, and just try to do her best to do her combat. This combat is very minor in some ways, but in the IL format, it's really important just because it's the last section and there's no checkpoints afterwards. So the moment you finish all those enemies, and it's not a good time that you like, you have to restart the whole stage. Castle skip is one of the hardest tricks ever. She's practiced really hard to make sure this would happen in a marathon. Kudos to her because it's really hard to do for anyone. Otherwise than that, the last Mach Speed section, which is Kingdom Valley. As you can see, it's a really beautiful stage. I really like the design of the Mach 4 Kingdom Valley, and I love the music too. Because it just feels so raw. And that's not something you see in games very often. A lot of Mach Speed is just the fact that you just have to be precise with your jumps, as well as light speeding when you can. Because it literally feels like a magnetic switch that you just pull into right away. Very simple, just doing her jumps and just kind of running through and enjoying the view. This is kind of like the best breather she can give. And a strat that you saw recently was chain jumps. She skipped it, at least the first one, because it's something that has been done in 06 and you can still do again. Otherwise than that, that is all of Kingdom Valley, and I suggest practicing a lot if you ever want to do this stage. Moving on to the last Sonic stage, at least to play as Sonic, is Aquatic Base. Aquatic Base is very interesting because it has a cycle. A cycle that goes from like the 36 to 30 seconds, 7 second, to like the 41 to the 43, and so on. What do I mean by this cycle? Well, when we get to the bubble where Sonic walks on like in the original 6, you will end up having to realize that there's the cycle of lasers gatekeeping you for how long like you can actually pass them. Usually they last for 5 seconds. So if she gets there on the right time, well then she ends up just, you know, having a great time. It's much more forgiving if you mess up just for 1 second, but you do have to do your best to come back and make sure that second's dead. Unfortunately, she will only have to get 1 laser skip, but otherwise than that, it's still great nonetheless, because it's really hard to do. If that laser appears, that's okay. That is absolutely a-okay. Sometimes inputs are not that friendly in this game, just know that there's moments where you end up just doing a bounce instead of a double homing attack. But if you ever end up having one laser skip instead of two, you can do a double homing attack to make it across, and it's very reliable. We'll move on to this the tail section. As you can see here, this is the second last time you'll ever play Tails, and a lot of it is of course just trying to make your way through the lasers and enemies and just getting across where you need to be spamming the A button to utilize that gauge as long as possible. She's going to go under the laser, and as she does that, she's just going to get across right away to the switch. Really simple, the lasers are gone, you're just getting to point A to point B, not a point C, where she has to get to another switch. She has to do one ring box throw, and it's very simple, although sometimes it's not easy to hit. And there you go, she hit the magnetic switch that kills all enemies, and boom, done. As long as you have the angle for the throw, all you gotta do is just click the button and you're done. She's gonna hit 4 magnetic switches, took her a little bit for the 4th one, and that's okay. And then boom, all the enemies are cleared, she can move on to the next section. Moving on to the next section, it is actually really fun to do this next section just because it is not as bad as a lot of people think. There's no cycles whatsoever. It's just a lot of trying to rely on not spamming your spin dash, but just kind of just playing the camera around. That way it angles just fine for you and you feel much better just getting through things. Using the magnetic switches, that way it kills the enemies really fast. We'll play Knuckles for the last time. Utilizing a high jump that will just get her across from point A to point B. Again, nothing really much to say when it comes to Knuckles, or really Tails, just because a lot of it is just flying and not utilizing that combat since it's not necessary. We will get to the last bubble puzzle, which this part has been added from Chaos X just because it makes it show that Knuckles is actually trying to be useful and support Sonic instead of just Sonic just teleporting there like in other stages. Otherwise than that, we will get to the last area for combat, and this combat is really short but really simple, utilizing these explosive boxes that insta-kill enemies, no matter what health bar they have. Utilizing her bounce to just kill enemies as fast as possible, or just spamming the homing attack. It's whatever preference you like. Relying on her spin dash and dodging the dash panels, that way it doesn't slow her down, and moving on. This end is always a little finicky, but that's okay. She just gets through it just flawlessly. Otherwise than that, that is all for the majority of the things that are really hard for Sonic and the Sonic stages. We will get on to the last stage, which is just Wave Ocean Tails. Otherwise than that, this is just the end, where you get to play as Tails, and you just try to fly from point A to point B. Some really neat things that you can do when you're Tails is that when you throw your ring boxes, it locks on, something that 06 didn't have, the original. And you can just utilize those moments just to like hope that you hit an enemy and see if it dies. That way you can get their energy and allow you to fly a lot longer, like if you defeat other enemies when you're Shadow or Silver. Utilizing her way just to go around whatever she needs to be around for. Otherwise than that, utilizing a tail swipe, that way she just start grinding, and boom. Just doing the best she can to fly, which is the best she can do just to be at her fastest. Using another tail swipe, and just getting across. A lot of ILs are really hard to do, and I suggest you do practice them, even the little things, because as soon as you have that as muscle memory, it allows you to keep playing the game really well. And it's that little thing that actually makes such a big difference. Sadly, there's not really much to do in Tails Wave Ocean or practice. It's just kind of a stage just to play as Tails. But still, it's the little things that if you happen to find, do your best to use it. That way you can still go as fast as possible. Otherwise than that, utilizing her high jumps like she usually can, doing her one last high jump, and just getting to the goal ring. And that's time!
I was actually like just under 20 seconds away from my world record. So this was a really good run.
This was honestly a great run. Yes, there was a few deaths, but that's okay because they weren't as big of a deal. So, really proud of you. Nice job. Otherwise than that, that is all for Gemless when it comes to Project-06.
Yeah.
It's really neat, just a really neat thing, and I hope that if any of you guys ever keep looking into speedrunning, I suggest you go check out her channel because she does her best to do whatever she can to keep evolving ILs and then end up evolving runs in general. It's something that's very cool and it's really satisfying once you get it down.
Yeah.
Otherwise than that, thank you so much for watching.
And I appreciate you being my commentator with me. This would have been a lot harder if I had to do it alone. And I also want to thank the entire P06 community with this. This was very fun to do, but stressful. All right.
I'm proud of you. Thank you.